What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here, back to review episode 1 of season 3 of Ash vs. Evil Dead, an episode called Family. In spite of being a massive Evil Dead fanatic as a kid, for whatever reason, I was very late to the party in getting on board with this show. And I'm kicking myself that I haven't been able to enjoy this show in real time over the last couple of years, because if you've not seen Ash vs. Evil Dead, even if you haven't seen Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness, I have a feeling you would still enjoy it, because one of the best pilots I have ever seen is episode 1 of season 1 of Ash vs. Evil Dead. It is funny as hell, and it basically destroyed all my preconceived notions about what the show is going to be. I was totally off the mark. I thought that in today's kind of soft and fuzzy, politically correct era, that there's no way a TV show could possibly capture the magic, the grandeur, the majesty of the great Ash Williams. But what I did not realize is that the writers and producers and actors involved in this show, many of them have been associated with the franchise since the very beginning. Long before they shot one frame of film for Evil Dead, they were making Within the Woods back in 1978, a short film where many of the tropes and hallmarks of this franchise we know and love were already at play, and there's a lot of recognizable gags and beats that have been used in the later films in the franchise. If you want my true deep dive into the history of the Evil Dead franchise, you'll have to check out episode 359 of Wrong Reel. You can find that either on wrongreel.com, or I actually posted an audio-only version of it on this YouTube channel a few videos back, so just look for WR359, and it's basically 2.5 hours of ranting and raving about the history of Evil Dead. But just as a way of a quick summary, because I don't think people should have to do homework in order to appreciate a quick video review, but I first discovered Evil Dead way back when I was in middle school on a bootleg highlight reel of a bunch of different horror scenes. I didn't even get to see the movie in its entirety, but something about watching a bootlegged, crummy VHS transfer made the movie all the more traumatizing, all the more horrifying. In high school, I became an Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness just maniac. I was even one of the co-founders of this group called the Dead by Dawn Society in my high school, where we would get together initially with a couple people and watch these movies, but over time our group just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I know due to complicated rights issues with Evil Dead 1, number 2, and Army of Darkness all belonging to different studios, sometimes it's hard for these movies to be direct sequels to and or reference the previous entries. I know like on Ash vs. Evil Dead, they can't even talk about Army of Darkness without kind of tap dancing around it with like vague references. But one thing I really love about Ash vs. Evil Dead is that it acknowledges all the history as canon, even when that canon or in that continuity is contradictory. In this franchise, it really stands alone. It's unlike any other because it's so disjointed and haphazard and kind of thrown together, and for whatever reason it still works. Like the first movie is the ultimate down and dirty cabin in the woods horror movie. I still think it's cool as shit. It absolutely blows my mind every time I see it. One of my all-time favorite horror sequences period is when Cheryl first rises up off the ground during that game where they're trying to see if the other girl is ESP about predicting cards. Scary as hell. Evil Dead 2, just bananas, so damn funny. Maybe the best one-man solo performance for much of that movie that I've ever seen in any movie ever. And then Army of Darkness is this strange like medieval superhero movie where Ash is magically transformed into this wisecracking, almost kind of John Wayne, Kurt Russell badass figure where he's gonna save the day and get the princess, etc. But as soon as I started playing catch up on Ash vs. Evil Dead, I was just relieved to see that they were playing into his advanced age. They weren't trying to disguise the fact that a lot of time has gone by, but that in spite of his advanced age, Ash is still very much Ash. But what I really truly love about this show is this trio of heroes involving Kelly, Pablo, and Ash, and that they've become this surrogate family of deadite killing badasses. And I would never say that this show is 100% a home run each time at bat, but what is amazing is that every episode and every season has moments, beats, and scenes that are just absolutely astonishing, where it shows the spirit of the original movies is very much alive in this show. And I feel like they're rapidly accumulating some additional scenes that rank alongside the all-time great Evil Dead moments. I mean, in season 2, watching Bruce Campbell beside himself with grief, bawling his eyes out in his car with Pablo in pieces beside him. I mean, it was at once very moving, but also totally hysterical that as a way of dealing with his grief, he's just out in his car doing donuts, getting wasted, and crying about the loss of his poor little Mexican, my poor little Mexican Honduran buddy. I mean, it was just so damn funny. But I think one of my all-time favorite moments was so subtle and so quick, but at one point Ash refers to Kelly as the daughter he never had, and they kind of share a look and a wink. And I think it really is remarkable how Ray Santiago, who plays Pablo, and Dana DiLorenzo, who plays Kelly, have managed to share the screen with Ash when Ash is this larger-than-life kind of badass figure. And when you have those larger-than-life figures, it's very easy for them to kind of just chew up all the available kind of dramatic energy or humor on the screen. But they're right there toe to toe hanging with them. And I think when it comes to like superhero slash fantasy slash horror antics on the small screen on TV, I don't think there's a better show out there right now than Ash vs. Evil Dead. I absolutely love it. So the fact that season 3 is back now, I couldn't be more happy, and I'm definitely going to be following it in real time moving forward. So let's talk about this latest episode. In the lead up to the season, we've been getting all kinds of crazy stuff that I absolutely love, but my favorite have to be these Shemp's beer commercials. I'm sure they're going to come up at some point over the course of the season, but I just love how this commercial for Shemp's beer just leans into the Ash persona, and he's talking about how it's never too early when you're drinking Shemp's and how it's for drinkers, not thinkers. I mean, it's simple humor, but it just makes you crack up. But at the start of the season, we have our characters back to normal life as we know it. Kelly's running a bar while Ash and Pablo are running a hardware store slash like sex shop emporium is where Ash's father used to work. It doesn't take long for things to kind of heat back up on the supernatural front in the town of Elk Grove because somebody finds the Book of the Dead, somebody's foolish enough to read it, and all hell breaks loose. Now, I knew this was coming from the trailers, but this season introduces the idea of Ash having a daughter. The character's name is Brandy Barr. And my biggest fear going into the story was, would the arrival of Brandy upset the three-person dynamic of our heroes from the last 2 seasons? I don't want anybody pushing Kelly out of the way because I feel like as much as Brandy might be Ash's biological daughter, Kelly really is the spiritual successor to Ash in his sense of bravado and heroism and shit-talking and all that good stuff. Luckily, Kelly is still very much a part of the drama, and she has a great heroic return in this episode. It seems as if the showrunners realize how lucky they are to have Dana De Lorenzo as a part of the show, so Kelly very much has not been pushed aside. She's still part of the central trio at the core of this show, but we have a situation where the local high school where Brandy is a student is now infected with an outbreak of deadites, starting with the school mascot, this like tiger mascot, but he's got blood oozing out of him and fangs and claws and etc. and so forth. And we also have Brandy's best friend who gets possessed. Ash and Pablo realize something's wrong when all the runes on Pablo's torso start to kind of bleed and open up. But we also have Ash meeting one of his former flings, and we get these great flashbacks of Ash with like a giant mustache and huge muscles. I don't know if they were like enhanced or if Bruce Campbell's just still really fit at his advanced age, but he never just really shows it. But we have this great reference to how he uses Lucky Condom when he was having sex with her, and that condom went 50-0. I mean, it's just disgusting humor that we associate with Ash, but it's why we watch a show like Ash vs. Evil Dead, to hear him discuss reusing condoms and going 50-0. In any case, he realizes that he does in fact have a daughter who's very much in need of his help. And as he and Pablo go to the high school to rescue Brandy, we get this great bit. Now, I wasn't quite sure if I heard it correctly, but as Ash is walking by and looking at the wall and seeing some of his old high school memories, he says, I met my first Linda here. Linda obviously is the name of his girlfriend in Evil Dead. With Evil Dead 2, they couldn't get the rights to their own movie back from New Line, so they basically kind of retold Evil Dead in the first like 10 minutes of Evil Dead 2. So it was almost like a recap. As a kid, I always assumed he'd just gone back up to the same cabin like a few weeks later with another person by the same name. But as an adult, I realized they were basically trying to find a way to bridge the 2 films without having to pay exorbitant like licensing fees to their first movie. But with the fact that he says, I met my first Linda here, I just thought it was a great nod to the kind of complicated rights history with this franchise. And this is a show with very short episodes, only 30 minutes. So there's not a lot of material to sink our teeth into, but we do get a fight scene that's kind of fun, kind of silly. I'm never a big fan when the action goes too into the silly side, and as they're fighting with all these musical instruments, it gets a little broad and a little lame, but there's a great bit with all these drumsticks coming after Bruce Campbell's face, and it reminded me a lot of the scene in Army of Darkness when all the skeletons are like punching and poking at him. Like that Three Stooges style humor is very much at the core of what Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and those guys were all about as kids in the 1970s. And Ash's signature style of humor is still alive and well. When he's meeting his daughter, he tells her, oh, well, you can call me dad, unless you're a deadite, and then you can go fuck yourself. Like, Ash must always be allowed to be Ash, or the show ceases to be something that a 41-year-old aging fan of the franchise is going to want to watch. But we get some decent gore. Brandy's mother actually gets beheaded at one point, and one of Brandy's friends who gets turned into a deadite. We get this crazy moment where they use a harp to kind of slice her face into a bunch of different pieces. It's pretty gross. So yeah, if you want gore, this episode definitely delivers. And in terms of lore, we see something interesting going on with Ruby, where Ruby's going through the Book of the Dead, and she basically uses some blood to like wash out the image of Ash holding up his chainsaw way back in the Middle Ages, and she kind of swallows it and becomes pregnant. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I have a feeling she's probably going to try and beget some sort of super warrior with which to fight Ash. Who the hell knows? But that's about all we get on the lore front. And we also see there's a young man who's part of the Knights of Samaria, who's one of Kelly's friends, who's got a bit of a hero worship thing going on with Ash. They all decide to get back together, fight the Deadites, etc. And even though this show, it's a very lighthearted show, as I said before, it's a short show. There's not a lot of opportunity to get super emotionally invested. But I have to say, when our trio put their fists together and were reunited at the end, just nothing but smiles, waves of chills. I was just overjoyed to see these three characters back together. I wouldn't say that this episode was by any means one of the finest episodes of Ash vs. Evil Dead that I've seen. I feel like season 1 and season 2 both have some really terrific episodes that are placed well above this, but I'm just thrilled to see this show back. Whether or not there's enough material episode by episode to really do reviews on this channel, I guess remains to be seen, because I don't want every single review just to be a recap of all the things that I love about the Evil Dead franchise. But I'm definitely going to be following it, and whenever an episode's amazing, I'm definitely going to be calling attention to it. So my thanks goes out to Bruce Campbell. You are a god among men. What you have accomplished over the course of your career is nothing short of stunning. I feel like you can easily make a case for Ash being the most interesting and exciting and entertaining superhero to emerge from the 1980s. I mean, some might say RoboCop, but when it comes to movie superheroes that came out in the 1980s, there's nothing quite like a wisecracking guy with a shotgun and a chainsaw chopping down demons, snapping off one-liners, etc. and so forth. It's just, I love everything about this franchise, and I'm just thrilled that for the next 9 weeks, I've got the show to look forward to. In any case, I'm going to wrap this sucker up. If you're a fan of Evil Dead and you haven't tried Ash vs. Evil Dead, definitely start with episode 1. You're going to absolutely love it. And if you're already a fan of Ash vs. Evil Dead, you don't need any encouragement from me because you've probably already seen this episode. But I hope you enjoyed my review and recap. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to talk more, leave a comment in the comments below or give me a shout on Twitter @Colbrax. And I hope everyone has a great week, and I'll talk to y'all soon.